How do you make meaningful work in a noisy world? Welcome to Growing a Fruitful Brand, where we discuss how to create and grow a brand that makes the world a better place for you, your customers, and your employees. I'm Ben Luters, founder and art director of Fruitful Design and Strategy, and I'm joined today by my good friend Craig Nashleanas, co-founder of Lens Distortions. A few weeks ago, I had his business partner and my other friend, Jonathan Kaiser, on the podcast. And in that episode, we get all into what Lens Distortions is, what they do, and all about the ethos behind their brand. So if you want to learn more about Lens Distortions, check out that episode. But really, the reason I've got Craig here today is because we had this amazing coffee conversation a few months ago. And the whole time I'm thinking, this guy needs his own podcast. He thinks so deeply about everything. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And so when we were talking offline, we were saying we don't necessarily want to get into the ins and outs of every technology and every trend that's happening right now, but really we want to talk more about how to think about the changes around us. How do we think about the technology and the different mediums that are changing around us? How do we think about that well? So to kind of tee us up, Craig, what is your kind of general consensus of the changing world that we live in, especially for us in the creative field?
That's a big question. I would say that my general consensus is I don't know what's happening or what's going to happen, by and large, but it can be fun to speculate, But I mean that genuinely in that there's a lot of people who claim to know a lot of things about how the world is changing, what the next 10 years are going to look like, disruption, whatever. I think things are moving fast, but when the dust settles and what that looks like could look a lot of different ways. And so I think it's a lot of observing and just sort of like watching and predicting. But one thing I've kind of chewed on is I'm thinking back to like the 2000, 2001 kind of .com bubble that was going on. And we were pretty young at that time.
It's been a while.
But, it seemed like the overarching idea there was that everyone thought like the future is now. It's here. We're ready for it. Let's go. People invested in everything and thought like this is here to stay. And it was kind of a preview of all the things to come, but the world wasn't ready for it all at once. And so you had a lot of stuff that kind of fizzled out and a lot of,
What I think of is pets.com. Do you remember when pets.com did all those Super Bowl ads and they're the little like sock puppet?
Yeah,
and then, they lasted like a year after that
I think that's what a lot of people think of, stuff like that. Like anything that can be put on the internet, people will want to buy on the internet and they'll want it now. Well, I mean, that is true today, but it took 20 years to get to that, And so, I mean, I think a similar thing with AI and machine learning and all of that, like, it's certainly a glimpse of the future of things that we will use, and we can already start using it in super meaningful ways now, but also there's all kinds of stuff you can do with it that isn't quite refined or isn't quite ready or requires so much hand-holding or prompting from somebody that is actually sort of saving them time in some of those aspects. So I don't know. I'm not worried about it. Like, I also think, like, for me personally, in our company, I mean, we serve creators. We serve people who are using like their creative skills to create something that didn't exist before. And last I checked, they weren't going through all that work just because they had to do it manually and they hated it or whatever. Like you like the creative process, right?
Exactly.
Like, so I think it's stuff that creative people, this is another tool in their tool chest to automate some of the stuff that maybe is more cumbersome or whatever. So certainly something to pay attention to, something that, we'll pay attention to in our company and try to figure out how to integrate and use in thoughtful and tasteful ways. But it's not like a new thing. I mean, AI is a technology on a huge, massive scale, bigger than a lot of things, but it's still sort of technology times what? It's amplifying what? It's being trained to do what, humans for now are still, picking what that it should be levering against. So, it needs to be thoughtfully used, I guess I would say. And I'm more skeptical of humans' ability to use AI, in meaningful ways than I am of AI being able to eventually do whatever we want it to.
Is there anyone that you think should be concerned about their job because of AI? I think that's one of the things that especially when, first, Dolly and, some of these, visual things. I think there's a lot of designers and illustrators that are like, oops.
Yeah, I mean, I think Siri, my watch just went off.
Did you hear that?
But Siri should be concerned about her job because AI is here to eat her lunch. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're doing something that's a pretty monotonous task, that's just like whoever's employing you to do it wasn't able to find, another way to replicate that. If it's a commodity, like that's what technology is good at replacing over time, is something that people are doing over and over and over again.
But in that analogy, or in that example, it's like, again, it's not so much about replacing jobs, it's more like being a tool in someone's, like I think of, how AI technology has improved, the time that I used to spend trying to cut people out in Photoshop, and now that stuff is like instantaneous. Yeah. And I see a lot of that kind of stuff. Like this was just a monotonous. Now, if your whole job was just cutting people out in Photoshop, which has been actual jobs, for people, I guess, some of them might be concerned, but, I'd hope that those people would be able to, use this technology to, make their jobs even better and deeper. Yeah.
And I think that, there's aspects of what people will use AI or generative art in this case for that, like they're in some ways replacing something that's already been commoditized with a different way to kind of do it. Because I say that, I mean, there's great artists that make stuff from scratch that get paid to do that. And that's really, really good. But we're also in a world where everything's on the internet and people have produced free stock imagery of all kinds of stuff. And so you already have people leveraging that free stock imagery. And so the price has gone down. What people are willing to pay, like a true artist to make something custom, has become, that's like sort of less in demand. But in some ways that makes it more special. It's like, because for the people who are willing to employ an artist to do something manually and put a labor of love into it, that makes it special. But, yeah, I think it's like if you are creating a custom, generated art of something you prompted it to versus searching, free or cheap stock imagery to find something that is similar, that could be an example of where it's actually just improved the workflow, but it hasn't necessarily devalued a human's work. The commoditization of humans' work kind of happened, before that in some way, which is an unfortunate thing in some ways, but I'm just saying like, AI didn't do that, it's just sort of opportunistically adding technology to something that was already disrupted by technology over time. The internet made cheap assets available.
Right. So Craig, how would you define meaningful work? Because I think as creatives, we all want to create work that is meaningful, right? That's lasting, that's timeless. But like, how would you define that? And how would you, I know this is really broad. That's kind of the point of today's conversation. Yeah. Think about some of these broader thoughts, but like, how would you encourage creatives to seek out meaningful work or go about it?
Yeah, I mean, meaningful work and meaningful creativity is in no way separated from what's meaningful for people and relationships and what. I mean, at the end of the day, I think you're a story brand certified agency. Like that whole thing is about story and the power of story, and people respond to story. And so whether you're illustrating a logo, something you do regularly, or you're cutting together a film, or you're writing a song or an album or whatever, I mean, you're telling stories. You are in some ways telling a story as old as time of just the human experience, right? So that is where meaning comes from, is people we love or know, or people we can relate to, going through this thing called life, where there's challenges and triumphs and end result of that, and that's the story, right? And so I often like to think about meaningful work and meaningful creating and storytelling sort of as the opposite. What's the opposite of meaningful? And it's shallow, right? In our company, we always say, like, in an increasingly superficial and commoditized world, we exist to help people create more meaningful work. And we believe that. Like, I mean, the world is getting increasingly more noisy, and there's a lot of shallow stuff. And a lot of people are optimizing for what gets clicks, what's going to get attention, and that's fine, but that's a tactic. That's not saying what's worth getting attention or what do we sort of convictionally want Instagram to be, or what do we want culture to be like?
I think about this every time I create the YouTube thumbnails for this podcast. I'm like, do I need to have those like little red arrows that point at something?
Do you use the clickbait playbook?
Yeah.
Or do you use like the design aesthetic that's true to you?
Right.
And guess what? Your design aesthetic is cooler, but will probably get less clicks because it doesn't hack the brain in the right way.
At some point, the cool thing about YouTube is you can switch all that stuff out later too and try different things. And so one night I'm going to switch everything to these really clickbaity, terrible things. And we're going to see how much better our podcast does. But anyways.
Every other one, the title also has to be like, we're finished. I'm done.
That's right.
You know, it's over, whatever.
Raj like yelling.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I feel that, now, so I think probably now because I have, just like everyone else, a podcast and posting more content and all this stuff, you just start noticing like, oh gosh, it is a noisy world. There's so much going on. And then now, you take Instagram, for example, think of all the AI generated things you're seeing too. Mm-hmm. And, and I don't know if it's just me because I am an illustrator and because I am, what I would consider an artist, like, I still feel like I gravitate more towards things that are really created by hand. Things that are created really by other people. Mm-hmm. Sometimes an AI generated thing might get me to click and be like, oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. There's actually an account that I started following. It was like beautiful interiors of buildings and stuff like that, and like cabins, and it was just like beautiful. Like I thought it was like amazing, photography. It's actually all AI generated.
You thought it was like an architecture portfolio, but it was actually like a kid in his basement somewhere else.
Exactly. Just generating these like beyond perfect, aesthetics of little cabins and stuff.
Yeah. And so the thing with that is like, I'm sure you probably feel this. I am so desensitized to amazing visuals. I've been around them for so long, and Instagram puts so many of them in front of us that it's like, we're not impressed by incredibly refined, like visual compositions and just imagery, right?
Right.
And so I think that leaves you going like, cool, this is stimulating, but like I'm looking for story and meaning and, I mean, you could just scroll forever and see stuff that looks really, really cool. But eventually you're like, whoa, what's the point, Well,
and I think that's why, people connect with, they connect with like humor, the storytelling, stuff like that. One of the AI things that kind of took the world, by storm, which I'm sure you've seen, is like all those Wes Anderson like versions of Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. I just saw one of like a Harry Potter one that people had made. But I think it's the story that's really interesting. It's like, oh, that is a fun mashup that we can like imagine, like what would Harry Potter be like if it was directed by Wes Anderson? Mm-hmm. And it's a fun exercise in creativity, in thinking. I think that's one of the more interesting I think use cases of AI in that kind of a realm. Mm-hmm. But kind of back to the bigger question, what thoughts do you have around, we've already started talking about Instagram, social media, and stuff like that. Like, how do you think about those things? Because obviously I don't get the sense that you spend a ton of time just scrolling feeds. Is that safe to say?
Well, I mean, I'm human like everyone else, so I think I get into seasons where I do that, and I notice it, and I would say I'm in that season right now, and like I spend more time on feeds than I'd like.
Than you'd like to.
But the thing is like knowing that you have a weakness to something doesn't make you resistant to it. The ways that you have to kind of, I've had seasons of life where I've unfollowed everyone on Instagram. So I still had it. You could DM me or whatever. But like there was no stimuli to be like, there's just nothing in my feed, Right. Unfortunately, Meta got pretty good at, we'll just show you other stuff. If you don't follow anyone, we'll just show you other stuff, So, but trying to stop that habit of just impulsively kind of filling your empty space with that. But and then the other things, truly, like this, you might not know this, there's most people know about screen time, but you can you can sort of set up reminders to automatically sort of close you out of any given app. So I have that set up specifically only for Instagram. It's the only app on my phone that's that way. But then also, interesting, I found this recently, within Instagram, there's a similar thing where it'll pop up a reminder. Of course, it won't close the app. Like they're just trying to be like, we were responsible.
We did what we had to do.
This was to convince some regulators that we're not a highly addictive drug. But yeah, that's in there too. So I actually have them both turned on, both at the iOS level and at the Instagram app level, so that it will be annoying. Like I want to be like stuck in like a doom scroll, and then I get like one pop up, and I'm like, no, just 15 more minutes, you know. And then another one pops up, and I'm like, okay, like
I've got a problem.
It's time to be done, you know.
I didn't even realize.
But you need those things to break you out of just the like, oh, that's interesting. And you go down these rabbit, trails of chasing stuff. So,
well, and I think one thing that I've noticed kind of change about me is I think now that I'm creating more content, whether it be with the podcast or other things for my company or even myself personally on my personal Instagram, like sharing illustration work that I'm doing. I think when I'm actually creating and contributing instead of just consuming, it's a different relationship too. And I think that there's something interesting about that. Like there's something about if it's all one way, it feels kind of weird. It feels like an addiction or something.
Yeah.
It's not a two-way kind of relationship. And so I have, similar to you, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with social media in general.
Yeah.
But I find that it feels like healthier when I'm actually contributing to it as well, you know, and telling stories and sharing things, and then also interacting with people too, because it is social media, right? Isn't that like the original point was to help connect us with people? I feel like the way that it's become, it's not very social. It's hard to be social. It's more like it's all about likes. It's all about you're just scrolling, just consuming. But like if you stop and actually like say something meaningful on a post or DM somebody, I think John and I have probably had more conversations on Instagram DMs than we have anywhere else.
Yeah.
And you can still do that,
Well, actually, I mean, and that's what's most normal, I think. I think everyone is mostly posting stuff and then their friends are private messaging them about it, And even the head of Instagram, I saw something a few months ago where he was like, messaging is just the thing that's growing more than everything else. Like it's not as much this broadcasting platform as it is like everything is just different ways to message. And we saw this with the apps over time. It used to be like a portfolio for cool pictures, that you took with your phone. And now it's like, well, what's the difference primarily between Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp and all these things? Like they own all the messaging apps and they're all just like, and then they added in the features that Snapchat had. Let's do ephemeral messages. That's what stories are, right? That was, and then they're like, oh, people are doing that more because it's less intimidating, and they just like make this thing and it goes away, or they just send it to their close friends. So like everything is just a kind of like a different way of framing up an excuse to like post some stuff so your friends will message you in some ways. Now, influencers, I don't know. That's maybe a little bit more about like likes and comments and that and. I don't know. I never tap like on anyone I don't know's like posts. So I don't know. I try to like not give the algorithm information either. You got to be like,
Craig knows too much.
Yes, maybe. But.
He's trying. Doesn't want to give him too much. Well, it is interesting because like I found. And I'm sure this is like the search page or the like page, whatever you call it on Instagram. It's serving up stuff that it thinks that you like based on your activity. So like I started realizing, I started noticing as I started liking and clicking on more watch related stuff. So I've really gotten into watches. John and I were like geeking out about it before and after our podcast interview. And now you go to my search page, it's just all watches, which is awesome.
The reason I'm laughing is because I remember one time, like probably a year or two ago, I got in this weird cycle. If Instagram thought I liked like really big trucks, like monster trucks. Like
isn't that your thing?
I mean,
I was telling the algorithm.
That's
Craig
the problem.
Loves these.
Yeah, like I don't recall ever searching for anything related to that or what. I don't know how I got that idea, but then I was kind of like intrigued, And so then it's like, well, hold on, don't Don't let your eyes, like, don't let your gaze look at that because, you know, they've somehow broken their relationship with, you know, your iPhone and are actually using the sensors to
read your,
you know, I'm not conspiratorial, but if you linger on anything, they'll show you more of that, you know? So it's like,
they do know if you if you linger. That's interesting. And so that's why Craig is so into trucks now. You should have seen the truck he drove up in, guys. It was a monster truck.
Great truck. And it's all thanks to Mark Zuckerberg because he put that on my feed and I bought it. So
I'm curious, do you have any hot takes as far as, since we're talking about social media, any hot takes on what you kind of, where you see social media going?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not super optimistic about, you know, wherever I see it going. I think the unfortunate thing is that it's all popular social media, all the predominant platforms are built on the premise of how do we hack, you know, human psychology to get their attention, you know, fixated. And so there's plenty of people like expats of these companies who have come out and said, like, I don't like what I was part of building there. And so there's an interesting dilemma though, you know, and even what we're doing, our company, we're hoping that the stuff that we sell has a high correlation to like ending up in meaningful content. But of course we can't control what content it's a part of, but then I even think about like, you know, how do we help support those people so their work gets noticed? Like if you make a really great documentary about a local organization in Omaha who's doing super meaningful work, like that's a meaningful story and therefore that's the substance for, you know, meaningful storytelling. But how do you get that noticed? And how do you get it noticed without sort of doing the sugary, you know, clickbait playbook that gets other things noticed? Hey, here's, you know, 3 hacks to do this thing or whatever, or super authoritative, just like talking to the camera and grabbing people's attention. How do you help? You know, and a lot of times social media is this like escapism, like it's sort of a way to be entertained and distracted from whatever's going on in your daily life, and that's fine. But if these platforms are also how we're disseminating content and disseminating meaningful stories, like how do those break through? And so, you know, for us, it's like we only kind of make like music that's pretty tasteful and pretty well suited for like a meaningful story. So we kind of just hope that like by limiting the selection to stuff that is a good fit for meaningful stories, people will make more of it, and that maybe music has this amazing ability to like make you feel emotions, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe one of the ways that people can cut through the noise is just with, you know, using music and thoughtful editing to grab people's emotions, you know, and be like, but yeah, I mean, it's a tough problem to solve. And yeah, I just sometimes too, all apart from content creation, I just think like, it seems like attention spans are going in one direction, which is like shorter. And you see this with kids, you know, their ability just to pay attention. Can kids even watch movies now? I don't know, probably, but like probably not as well as we used to be able to watch a 2-hour movie, you know, because if you're just watching short stuff and switching to the next thing and switching to the next thing, I'm interested in like, are there ways for people to do one thing for a long time? So I think YouTube's interesting this way because there are some creators that are really good at storytelling and they'll keep people engaged for an hour. Like, we're going to go do this thing today. Come with me, you know, whatever.
That's right. Guys like us. I mean, I'm sure this will be an hour conversation and you're going to listen all the way to the end and like and subscribe.
Yeah. So
ring that bell.
That's meaningful storytelling too. I mean, it doesn't just have to be like tug at your heartstrings type stuff. It's like, do you have the ability to keep people engaged and do something relatable and whatever versus just like, you know, flood their brain with dopamine for 5 seconds before they do that again and again and again.
Do you think that the social media platforms, you know, Facebook, you know, Mark Zuckerberg, you already joked about, Elon Musk, these guys, that like, they're going to swing the other way. They're going to see all the signs and be like, oh man, we've been, you know, getting people addicted to their devices, and they're really going to, you know, de-incentivize those things? Or is it like, no, this it's about making money. It's about attention span. Like we have to keep these things as addictive. Like, will the feed ever end? Will they, you know, like for example, you know, I know that there are some feeds and stuff that like, they only scroll so far. I've heard that, or like the Visco app doesn't display likes, you know. I guess apparently in the settings of Instagram, you can shut off seeing likes. I was just talking to a friend who's actually has a lot of followers on Instagram, but he turned off the ability to see likes on Instagram, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, like we're not immune to this either, but the things that we like aren't the same things as what we know we need. And so like, you could be like, oh, I love Instagram. I love like looking at just, big trucks. Right?
Right. That's my thing.
And be like, also I waste an hour a day doing that or something. Right. But it still doesn't necessarily change the habit. Right. And so, people know that they don't even want to necessarily, use these apps the way they do, but they still do. And so, I think a lot of these business owners and, publicly owned companies, they're just trying to say like, what can we do to, increase engagement and continue to grow and all of this. And I'm not against publicly owned companies in any way, but, I just don't think they have very good incentives to do things that are healthy. They have good incentives to do things that keep the apps going. But I guess if I had to guess, I would say that more likely than them changing in meaningful ways is that they'll just be subverted by the next generation of things, and a younger generation of people will, give traction to something that's a little bit different, a little more personal, maybe more specific to their close group of friends. More casual, something like that. And then, the big incumbent platforms will figure out ways to try to adapt and latch on to that. I mean, that kind of happened, like Instagram was for like, people who are now in their 30s and 40s, in the Bay Area it started, right?
Right.
And
do you remember some of those terrible photo filters they had back in the day?
They were great.
Take a picture of your food and
it's like sepia.
Really
X Pro
heavy.
2 maybe was one of them.
Yep.
Funny. So I think that probably, but where I was going with that is Instagram adopted the things from a more younger generational app like Snapchat, and then it's interesting now TikTok is like, seems like hotter than everything else, and so I'm sure the apps are figuring out ways to integrate.
And you're big on TikTok, right?
Yeah, man. I spend an hour a day looking at big trucks on Instagram, but I spend like 10 hours a day learning dance moves on TikTok. So I don't.
I've not ventured there.
Yeah,
I have not ventured on the TikTok. Subscribe and ring that bell. And one thing that I think is interesting too is, focusing, like limiting yourself, even as company. One of the first things that we advise other companies, because everyone wants to know, what should I be doing on social media? One of the first things we say is like, pick one. It'd be better if you were like posting more regularly and engaging more on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Or X, or whatever your social media of choice is,
right?
Then trying to, get on Pinterest and get on this and get on that,
totally.
Like feeling like, and so just focusing, and it's okay if you don't have, one of the 10 social media platforms, and which ones make the most sense for you and like what you're trying to accomplish. And so I think like giving people permission to like, to kind of show discretion and just wisdom on like, what can I handle? Like recently, we pretty much just post on LinkedIn and Instagram, Fruitful, and YouTube, I guess. YouTube is my favorite. I love YouTube. I spend probably the most time on YouTube these days.
Do you get more traction if you say I love YouTube?
That's right. I love you, YouTube. I'm hoping this video will get bumped up in views because of that, and all the money that we get from our views now.
Unfortunately, there's not like a widely known overlord on YouTube whose name you can mention. The CEO changed somewhat recently, but you don't got like Zuck or Musk or.
In fact, if we say their names, we might actually go down.
Yeah,
so,
I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not sure who we should be saying.
Actually, I think the algorithm favors controversy. So,
true.
No matter what, we're good. I think
we're good. That's probably true. Okay, speaking of hot takes, though. Do you have a hot take on this? Wasn't in our questions that I sent over, but the metaverse. How are you feeling about the metaverse these days?
Yeah. It's interesting. Jonathan, my business partner, and I remember having a debate a couple of years ago where he was like, this is so dumb. Nobody wants this. It's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling him, like, I don't disagree with you about the first part, but I think that like these companies are just going to will it into existence. They're going to figure out a way to do it, you know, and figure out a way to commercialize it and get people hooked on it or whatever. And that remains to be seen. But I don't know if you saw the thing with Lex Friedman.
Dude, I was just
recently getting
about
scanned in.
I was just about to bring that up.
His sort of emotional reaction. So he got scanned into the metaverse and had a conversation with Mark Zuckerberg where they weren't in the same room, but he felt like they were sitting across from each other like we are. Or
and if you watch this,
are we in the metaverse? I don't know.
Yeah, actually, we're going to reveal at the end that this is actually not. We're not in the same
Mark
room.
Zuckerberg. So.
And I'm Lex Friedman. I've just been, changing my voice for this.
And
podcast.
now we're going to fight.
Now we're gonna fight the controversy. We're gonna wrestle right here on the mat. We're gonna get into some Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Is that what they do? But yeah, that kind of did blow me away. Just because the metaverse was like it was a fun thing to make fun of a few years ago, and it was like these disembodied, like, Wii Sport looking people, like, no arms or legs. And it's just like, the graphics itself is just like, why would I ever choose to do this instead of like just live in real life? Like I'm not really following. Then I watched some of that interview, Lex Friedman with Mark Zuckerberg, and I was like, okay, this is next level. Mm-hmm. I still don't fully understand and I probably still identify with John Kaiser. Like, why do we need this? Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, I'm paying closer attention. I'm taking it a little bit more seriously. I'm interested to know where this could go.
Well, I think it's similar to the AI conversation where what technology makes possible does not mean the same thing as how do people leverage this in meaningful ways.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's funny, as you were talking, I was even thinking just about, like, my mind always tries to go down the road to the future of, like, how else will people use this? And I was thinking about things like, if you could have, like, a parent or a loved one who, is scanned in as an avatar and it has their voice, and AI could potentially, like, make them say anything, or they just have a recording of them. And say that loved one passes away, and then you're able to go in the metaverse and have like a conversation or to sit and listen to them. Is that actually good for you?
Right.
Or should you have the closure of like, no, this person has moved on,
Well, doesn't Alexa already do that? I thought there was like some big story about how Alexa can take the voice of anyone, and that they'd already, like, people having conversations with, I think it was Alexa. There's so much. This technology is moving so fast. Yeah. But I already heard Raj shared that with me, a story of basically having AI conversations with a deceased relative's voice.
That seems like very emotionally treacherous.
Yes.
I
think that's an ethical line, isn't it?
I think, like, my dad died when I was 20. That was 13 years ago.
Right.
I don't want to open that, Pandora's box back. Oh, I have 13 years of somewhat closure on that,
Absolutely.
Like, so I think about stuff like that. But at the same time, and I think a lot of people would, agree with our, consensus on that there. Some people would disagree and say, oh, no, absolutely not. I want that. But for those who agree with what we just said, that probably wouldn't be emotionally healthy. Does that mean that they're not going to be tempted to do it?
Oh, yeah. Well, and you're seeing it in movies already, right? Obviously the de-aging of actors and stuff like that. And I was reading this article about, because in the new Indiana Jones movie, there's just like really, really compelling de-aging of Harrison Ford that just looks so real, better than anything that, had come before. And you're seeing more and more of this kind of stuff. And it's like, wow, are actors' careers now going to be extended like way longer? And then what about after they die? It's like now we can have CGI Harrison Ford when he, if he ever passes away, that's, I don't know. I feel like there's like all this, and this is why I love having you in here, because you think about these kind of things. Would you consider yourself a futurist? That's when I think of you. I think like you what you just said about like you like to play things out, and I feel like a lot of people, they're just interacting like right, like, okay, well, do I want to do this? Yeah, I'll go download this AI thing. And I feel like that's one of the things I find so interesting about you, is you seem to have this ability to kind of play things out into the future. I don't know. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I agree with the description that you just, I mean, I'm just a big picture thinker. Like if we talk about building something at work, I think about, okay, would people like that now? But then I think about basically, technical debt and what sort of obligation does that create? And is this something that we can sustain and commit to for a long period of time? Or are we going to make people happy now only to make them less happy later when we fail to, do this well long term? And so that's why I sort of have that same thought about and skepticism about, like I said, AI and stuff. It's like, I don't doubt that we can make all this stuff, but I'm almost more skeptical of humans' ability to be consistent and disciplined about using things in a thoughtful and good way, or, making a feature and continuing to support it in a software product the way it should be supported or whatever. So, you asked, do I consider myself a futurist? I mean, I don't know. Aren't futurists people who are usually generally optimistic about the future?
I don't know if that's necessarily true. Maybe.
Yeah. Are they just long-term thinkers? I mean, I'm not a future optimist. I have pretty sobering thoughts about a lot of things, but I'm generally optimistic, and I generally think that things will move forward into the future and we'll figure out a way to adapt and stuff. But
that's why I think I had you here was like, I don't, like you already said it, you're not like a conspiracy theory. Like,
not at all.
But I think you have this like cautious thoughtfulness.
I'm skeptical.
Skeptical.
You have to prove it out. You know, so things don't just work positively because something was set in motion and then it just ends up in a positive place. I mean, it takes, again, people thoughtfully stewarding things to a healthy thing. With like things like renewable energy or like solar or nuclear, right? We can even have like a debate around that. Yeah,
we're broadening
how far
this.
Can we go? And I am way out of my depth on this. But
no. Let's go. Let's go one at a time.
All I know is that people need like energy resources to do stuff. And so people smarter than us are trying to figure out how to do that in a thoughtful way, but they're also creating like massive responsibility, right? And so I'm always just more skeptical of our like complexity and messiness as humans to not fumble things. Like we will, When
are you running for office, Craig? That's really what this is.
At this rate, never, because of that de-aging technology. We're just going to get all these freaking old guys that keep doing stuff. We can't get them out of here. And it's so, yes, at this rate, never. And but also, I don't want to sign up for that. Who are the people that are signing up for that?
I know. Well, I mean, it's the wrong people. But I think that it is interesting, though. We do need more people who are thinking not just short term, who are not just thinking about, oh man, this is going to make my job so much easier, or this is going to be cool or fun, or I can make money fast this way. See a lot of people jumping on a new technology, whether it's like NFTs or whatever, trying to gamify all this stuff in the short term instead of like taking a step back, taking like a big deep breath and like how might this play out? And also, well, just like from a risk standpoint of like, we only have so much time and attention to invest in stuff. So if you can slow down a little bit and think about what do I want to learn more about and get better at and participate in, that's going to be like a game that I can play for a long time or an activity I can participate in for a long time versus like go all in on a opportunity or something and then have that go sort of nowhere. Now, I mean, fail fast, people say all kinds of stuff like that, but I'm just saying like fail forward.
Like NFTs, if you got really, really into that, maybe you're building the future version that's going to be, more sustainable and even keel. But for the rest of the people who are just sort of like jumping in on a trend, all of their knowledge about that is currently sort of sitting dormant. The underlying technology of that is obviously here to stay. Like blockchain is different than NFT, right?
I was just going to say, can we talk about that for a second? I love this. We should just call this hot takes. Technology hot takes.
I don't know anything about any of this stuff.
I know. That's what I love about you, though. It's like it's not that you're an expert on any one of these things, but like kind of the whole thing you think critically of. So I am curious, just any like quick hot takes about blockchain technology.
I mean, I think blockchain, it seems like that's the future for a lot of things, like contracts and financial stuff, just records and sort of indisputable records, and
not super sexy stuff necessarily, but important.
No, it'll solve really important problems, but the most important problem isn't like Scary Ape Club or whatever
what is that?
Bored Ape Yacht Club.
There we go. Yeah. Man, we are so current.
Yeah,
we are just on trend. Did you jump on the NFT thing at all?
I don't. Yeah,
did you?
No, I don't give money to strangers on the internet. It's just not like a big part of my life. So now strangers give me money on the internet every day.
That's true.
I love it. It's great. But,
it's nice to be that.
And I'm
on
trustworthy.
That side.
You can give money to our company on the internet. We will deliver on what we say we do. But
were you like early adopter in like Bitcoin or Ethereum? Were you into any of that stuff, or are you?
No. I mean, I had a client before we sort of went all in on lens distortions. I was doing some consulting, and I had a client who was big into Bitcoin, and they asked if they could pay me in Bitcoin. And so I was like, I guess. And I set up a wallet and all of that. Yeah. And like when it had multiplied quite a bit, I sold it. Way before it multiplied like it did in the last few years.
So you should have held on to that a little longer.
Yeah, but I made a good decision knowing that the future wasn't, I don't feel bad about my decision at all because it wasn't foolish in the least bit,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do I wish hindsight's 20/20? But
of course,
that's the thing. You can't really control that, so you got to make decisions you can live with. And I'm pretty macro, like risk averse. Like the number one rule of business and of life, basically, is like don't die, right? So like you get paid by a client in something, and then like that money is worth more money a few years later. Like that is like a good thing. Could that money be worth nothing if you hold on to a few years more? Like I thought, yeah, maybe. Who knows? I don't know anything about this. Also, I don't know enough about this or care enough about this to track it closely and understand where it's headed, what its momentum is, anything like that. So, like, know what you know and know what you don't know, and then just sleep. Do what you can do to sleep at night. So it's like,
that's the clip right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of hot takes, I like this. You do have so many good ones. Any hot takes on Elon Musk, Twitter becoming X, any of that brand stuff?
I mean, it's interesting.
Are you an Elon Musk fan?
I would not say I'm a fan, but I'm also not. He's a very complicated person.
Yeah.
He obviously has done incredible things, and obviously because he's got some serious chips on his shoulder, which is a just understandable thing. A lot of ways I kind of feel for him,
Right.
But I mean, obviously incredibly impressive person, doing things on a scale that you or I never will,
Well, speak for yourself.
Yeah, well, all right. Well,
you haven't seen how many views this video is going to get, obviously.
Well, yeah. I mean, our contentment will stop, far short of that. The things that he's motivated to do. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think X is going away. I don't think that it will just completely fold up and flop or anything like that. I mean, I think was changing it to X a good move. I don't know. Twitter had so much brand equity. It's great, whatever. But he's not trying to stay true to what it originally was. I think he sees it as a thing that he can kind of evolve into what his original dream for a thing called X was, right? I mean, he became part of PayPal because he had started something called X, right?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, you know, or have forgotten.
He owned X.com or was a founder of X.com, and that merged with PayPal and became the successful PayPal.
How long ago? I mean, this was like
2000,
early
2000s,
ago, right.
I think, maybe late 90s. And so I think he still had X.com or something. That's why he was able to do it.
I think he lost it and then had to get it again.
Okay.
There's like an interesting story here for sure.
He probably just paid like a couple $100 million to get it or something.
Didn't have to think twice.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. It's not like I'm scouring the internet looking for other people's hot takes on him because you just bump into those without looking for them. But people say like, he thrives on chaos. Like this is what he does. So
right. Well, there's that new biography about him.
Yeah, Walter Isaacson. No, but I listened to an interview with Walter Isaacson about it, and it made me kind of want to read it. But yeah, I think it's a helpful thing for people just to understand like you don't do that great of things without being haunted by some serious weighty stuff, you know?
Right.
Like Elon Musk believes that we should, you know, go to Mars because it's our only hope for humanity. And so he's like, no one else is working hard enough on this. Like, that's my understanding, is that he's actually operating from a very firm conviction that we have to save humanity. And so let's do this.
That's the key to it. And you believe that as well?
Well, you know, I don't think we're going to save ourselves. So
that's well said.
But
said.
Bitcoin, I think, will save us. So.
Bitcoin, that's right. The Bored Ape Yacht Club will save us.
Yes.
You've heard it first here.
In the end, when AI comes for us, lean on your Bored Ape.
That's right. Lean on your Bored Ape. So we've talked about Elon. We've talked about a lot of things. I love this. This is going to be really fun to cut up into little shorts. But I want to know, what are your thoughts about Apple? You know, going into the future. Obviously, you know, Apple had Steve Jobs back in the day. I don't even know how many years it's been now that Steve Jobs has passed on.
I believe he passed away in 2011.
Wow, that's crazy to think if that's true. And I'm sure you know. So
I don't know. Like everything in this conversation, I am speaking out of turn. So
we'll have to cut that. But yeah, any thoughts around Apple? Kind of like what they're doing right now. Apple Vision Pro. Like, do you have a hot take on that, or any of the technology that they're dabbling with?
I mean, their move to their own processors has been great. You know, they're making really great processors really fast. It's a big leap from where they were at before. I had I bought a computer in 2014 and I've been using it all the way up till now. And it was like the most overclocked, every bell and whistle you could get. And it was getting me by. But then I bought the cheapest MacBook, just the most basic one.
Yeah.
And like our CTO was telling me, he's like, if you buy the cheapest one, it is going to be like 10 times better than what you currently have. And what I had was working fine. It could do everything I needed. Sure. And I got the most basic MacBook Air, and it was like, this is night and day. This is insane. And so we just went through a big jump, and I'm not smart enough to talk about it, but I know like engineers have been talking about like, we went through a pretty big leap in computing power and kind of there. And so, but what I wonder about with that, again, my skepticism is like, well, so will we just sort of take that for granted and say, cool, we'll just build like, you know, more resource heavy software applications that, you know, then put a heavier load for that processor to handle or whatever. But I don't know. That's kind of getting in the nitty gritty. I think Apple overall, at the current moment, they're not doing anything that's super interesting at like a broad cultural level that we can see. And I think that's what's interesting, is that they have always walked this fine line between like appeal to the masses and making culturally relevant like technology. You know, Steve Jobs' classic bicycle of the mind, and it's standing at the intersection of humanities and technologies. Those were kind of his ideas that he stole from someone else, turns out. Not stole, borrowed.
Was it you?
know, no, yes, no.
Yes. 12-year-old Craig said that one time.
I'm actually 100 years old, and because of this de-aging technology, I look very young.
Oh, man.
Very young, as in like a 30-something dad young. But
that's the look he really wanted to go for.
Yes, I wanted it to be believable.
I could have gone to 25, but decided to. 30, how old are you? 33?
33. Yeah. But I guess I think I don't have any reason to put a number to this or a timeline, but I'm just sort of like the new iPhone just came out, and everyone's like mad. It seems like you didn't make anything new. You just made a different color and charged more for it or whatever.
Right. You hear that a lot.
Yeah. I'm guessing in the next, I mean, everyone's kind of been saying this, but 5 years or whatever, they'll come like, what happens when Apple applies their way of thinking and their way of making things available to the everyday person over time, and like the way they did with the iPod or whatever, to self-driving cars or to, you know, other things. So
do you see Apple Vision Pro as like part of that innovation, like a step in the right direction, or are you kind of like,
it seems really niche to me. It might become a mainstream thing, but it's so expensive and so much technology in it that it can only really be used by like mostly creative professionals. That's like, I feel like, who can justify it, or like just wealthy people who want to spend money on something.
Will you guys get one? Lens distortions?
No, I mean, people on our team might buy them, but we don't have a.
You're like, we don't have that in the budget.
We don't have a reason to buy one. So I'm fascinated by it. I think it's cool. I'm not like anti it. I just, it's not in its current form, like changing the world.
Yeah. Well, Raj and I talked about it a little bit when they first announced it, and I'm like you. I'm pretty skeptical about new technology, and it's kind of like I feel like it's so easy for this stuff to kind of run our lives, and I'm not really into the hype. But Raj kind of helped me like see kind of, use cases and even watching some of Apple's talking about it. I think the one that really kind of got me like curious is just the idea of like, you put this on and you could be surrounded by screens, kind of like Tony Stark, but like kind of in your head, you know? And that's interesting. Like, if you could really see like the work that you're working on, like if your laptop screen was now, surrounding you, in some ways that might be like the worst thing ever, but it has some interesting, implications. I do feel like it looks super goofy when you see it in the video and like couples sitting on a couch, both wearing them and watching like a movie or something. I feel like it's very, but I mean, a lot of times new technology seems a little weird too.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of bored by what is the final 10% of like completely optimizing the idea of watching a movie or something like that. And maybe that it's a way bigger improvement than 10%, but I can watch a movie on a 10-year-old TV at my house that can't even do 4K or something like that. And if it's a good movie, like get lost in that world. And I don't know.
Is there a point that like technology is like,
I'm trying to spend less time on technology. Exactly, I'm trying to like be on my computer, then close it and like go for a walk, and like do more of that. Like, I'm not trying to figure out ways to get more lost in it because I can already do that with those.
It's so immersive. It's like going for a walk, still very immersive.
Literally the most immersive sort of experience. You go outside and you're surrounded by all kinds of stuff.
And he's talking about a walk in the metaverse, of course.
Yes.
Not in real. We don't walk.
I'm bored by Apple Vision Pro because I want like Apple space suit that I can like suit up on and then, it can track all my limbs in the metaverse.
Oh man, well we've gone really broad today. We probably should bring this thing home. I'm just trying to think of like how to bring it home. Craig, do you have any, especially for creatives now? I think for any of the creative professionals that might be listening, just any parting words of advice to them, kind of as they're living in this fast-paced world, specifically people trying to create meaningful things and tell stories?
What makes meaningful stories will never change. What makes the importance of people applying taste to things will never change. And so, I mean, understanding the principles of a good story, understanding taste is a subjective thing, but understanding what makes things tasteful or perceived as tasteful. Why do these people think this is tasteful? Develop your own taste, develop conviction around that, and then apply that to whatever technology is going on. The same person, like back in the day before electronics existed, like the taste of a like fine art painter could be applied to the craft of filmmaking. It can translate, right? But that can't be just like, you can't hand someone that taste in a product or something like that. So technology it's sort of unopinionated. You have to apply the opinion to it. And that opinion is meaningful because it's coming from someone you respect or someone you trust. People hire you because they trust you, they trust your expertise. So that's what I'd say is like, be relational, understand what makes humans tick, and develop like your own taste, your own convictions. Don't worry as much about the playbook. Don't worry much about what gets the short-term results, but like, develop that taste, figure out what is the, areas of this that I want to be in for the long haul, and then make sure you adapt to technologies that's there, but know that like there's always a place for thoughtful, creative people to do stuff long term. So be optimistic in that sense, and I guess I'd leave it with that.
Craig, thanks for being on the podcast.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today on Growing a Fruitful Brand. If you found today's show helpful, don't forget to subscribe and consider sharing it with someone who might also enjoy it.
And if you'd like to work with Fruitful on a branding, website, or messaging project of your own, you can always reach out on our website, fruitful.design.
Until next time, don't forget to grow something good. You jerk.